Sarah. We're going to move on. Please get your questions ready, think about them, and write them down so you won't forget. The next speaker is Jenna Albiani. And Jenna is currently doing her PhD under Tay Hart, who is a member of our team in the Digestive Diseases Center. And I think that she's going to be talking about a very important topic, the aspects of the psychology of having a genetic disease. And what she's going to talk about is how Lynch syndrome in a family impacts parents and their reproductive decisions, which obviously is important. And she's going to present her own research findings, which explores how parents view their own health and their children's health, and it also examines the psychological impact of genetically passing down Lynch syndrome to their children. Jenna, she's going to talk about the next generation.
So I'm going to switch gears a little bit now and move away from the medical talk and talk about psychology associated with being a parent who has Lynch syndrome. And what I'm going to be presenting to you is some of the research that we've actually done here at Mount Sinai Hospital. And in particular, I'm going to be talking about some of the concerns that parents have and what they're doing that really helps. What's really good about what they've been doing to help cope with some of the stress or the worry that they're experiencing. And finally, I'm going to end our talk tonight just by giving you some really practical strategies that you can take home with you around talking to kids about Lynch syndrome and some communication around that. So before I begin, I just want to acknowledge the collaborators on this study, which are the genetic counselors here at Mount Sinai, Melissa, Spring, and Kara, and also from Ryerson, Lindsay Corbett, and Dr. Tay Hart. So we've heard a lot about genetics of Lynch syndrome tonight, but basically to boil it down, if one parent carries the genetic mutation for Lynch syndrome, there's a 50% chance that it will be inherited by each child that family has. So it's not surprising then to think about the fact that parents are going to be concerned about the well-being of their children. And in fact, really, if you ask parents who come in for genetic testing why they're there, the main reason that they'll tell you is because they want to get genetic risk information for their kids or for their grandkids. So it really is at the forefront of parents' minds. But despite this, we actually know quite little about what the experience is for parents who have Lynch syndrome. And so that's why we decided to design the study that I'm going to be talking to you about now. So the research that we've done here at Mount Sinai is actually 2 studies. And the first study, what we did is we mailed out a questionnaire package to every person who's a member of the Genetic Cancer Registry who has Lynch syndrome. And we asked them a number of different types of questions. So things like, what's your family history around this? What kind of medical variables are we talking about? And we put in a number of different types of psychological measures, as well as other descriptive information. So things like, do you have kids? Have they been tested? And questionnaires are really good because we can get a lot of information from a big group of people. So for example, in this study, we had questionnaires returned by 207 people, which was really great. But the problem with them is that we only get surface level information. So what we wanted to really find out is more about the experience of being a parent who has Lynch syndrome. And so for that reason, we did the follow-up study, which was a telephone-based interview with parents that we hand-selected based on a number of different criteria. And we asked them a number of different questions about their life and about their kids and about their experience. So I want to present to you some of the findings that come from this research, and really with a focus on the parenting part. So to start, just a snapshot from the 207 people that returned the questionnaires. So first, who has kids? Well, most people actually do. So in total, about 3/4 of people in the sample have children. And for people who do have children, the average is about 2 per family. It's notable that most of the parents who reported back to us, their kids are adults, so 20s, 30s, 40s, older, but about 30% of the children in the study are under age 18. So the next question we asked is, have your children been tested for Lynch syndrome? Do you know their status? And here it's a bit more split. So about 55% of parents who have children over the age of 18 have had their kids tested. And the reason that we looked at over 18 here is because that generally is the age that genetic testing is recommended and allowed for kids. And of those who have been tested, about 57% had a confirmed diagnosis of Lynch syndrome. So one of the big things that we were really interested in knowing was, does having Lynch syndrome impact your decision to have children? Did it have any impact in childbearing and your family planning decisions? Both your own risk and your risk of passing it on to your children. And the answer that we got was a resounding no. So in general, about 80% of people said that having Lynch syndrome or knowing about cancer risk did not at all impact their family planning decisions. And really only about 6% said that it did have quite a lot or a lot of an impact on that. But then we asked parents, how much do you worry about your children or your grandchildren's risk of developing cancer? And here the story is a little bit different. So if we look at it, almost half of the people are saying that they worry about their children or their grandchildren's risk quite a bit or a lot. So what does this tell you? Well, basically, even though having Lynch syndrome doesn't impact the decision of having children, parents who have had children are living with quite a significant amount of worry or concern about their kids and about their kids' risk of developing cancer in the future. So really we need to know more about what's going on for people in this respect. So, which is where study 2 came in, which again was where we called parents and talked to them for about an hour on the phone. And as we were talking to parents, what became really clear was that we were hearing a lot of really similar stories from people. People with a lot of diversity, a lot of different ages, different backgrounds. But what came up was a lot of major themes that I'm going to just talk to you about now. So the big things that matter to people. So basically, what are parents worried about? Well, there's 3 big topics that consistently came up from interview to interview. And the first is passing on the gene to their children. So specifically, parents are really worried about their kids' future in terms of them having to go through the screening procedures, because as we've heard, they're not the most comfortable things to have to endure. But then obviously they're also worried about their children developing cancer, both currently and in the future. The second big item that they're worried about is having their children tested and going through the process of doing the genetic test with them. They're really worried about the fact of if the kids are emotionally prepared for that. Are they psychologically ready to go through that process, and are they able to cope with it if they find that they do in fact have Lynch syndrome, and how would that impact their future? And there also a really common concern that came up was worries about children's ability to get insurance in the future. So if they want to get life insurance, how does knowing that you have Lynch syndrome impact that? And then finally, the third category that parents tend to worry about is about their personal health and their ability to parent. So specifically, parents talked a lot about their fears of getting cancer themselves and how that would impact their ability kind of on a day-to-day basis to do what they needed to do to just care for their children. There were also a lot of concerns around if they got sick, would they be able to work, and how that would impact the family from a financial standpoint. And then, it's human to have concerns about passing away. And what's interesting is that for the parents, it wasn't their own fears of death, but it was their fears of abandoning children if they should die that came up a lot. So as you can see, there's a lot of pretty heavy topics that are on parents' minds and that they're worried about. But what we also learned from parents is that they're doing a lot of really good things to cope, a lot of really productive strategies that help them on a daily basis to manage some of this. So, what helps parents to cope? Well, these are the things that came up time and time again and people were talking to us about. And so the first thing is really having an open level of communication about Lynch syndrome within the family home. And so this helps parents in a couple of different ways. First, it seems that if parents are able to talk about their own concerns, it reduces their anxiety. So if you're talking to your family about maybe a symptom that you're experiencing, just being able to use them as a soundboard can be helpful. But also, when there's a good open dialogue in family, parents feel more confident that if something were to come up with their kids from a health perspective, that their kids would bring that to them. And so it seems to give a lot of confidence in just knowing that and reduces parents' anxiety. There's also a lot of evidence that in the power of knowledge. So parents have done a really great job in terms of becoming knowledgeable about Lynch syndrome. And it seems that in this case, the more that they know, the more their anxiety decreases. Also going in for really regular cancer screenings and seeing your doctors regularly has been really helpful in lowering anxiety. And parents also talked a lot about living a healthier lifestyle. So that can really change depending on who you are, but things like quitting smoking or having a healthy diet, lots of exercise. Those things, not only we know that they help you physically, but what's interesting is that in this case, parents got a real sense of control over making those changes at the family level, and that really helped to lower their anxiety as well. Also, engaging in spiritual practices came up a fair bit, so that could be going to church, just having prayer in your life, or meditation, and also talking to supportive individuals. So whether that's a friend, a therapist, family member, again, just having somebody to share your concerns with was very helpful for people. So another big question that we wanted to know about was how do parents react to having their children tested for Lynch syndrome? And not surprisingly, the answer to this varies a fair bit depending on what the results were that came back. For example, for a child who came back and was a gene carrier, there were initial reactions of guilt, a fair bit of guilt around this idea that you've passed on this gene to your child, and somehow that implies that it's your fault. A fair bit of sadness and anger around the unfairness of it, that that your kid didn't do anything to deserve this, so it's not fair that it's panned out that way. And also a lot of anxiety about your children's health and their future. If a child came back and they weren't a gene carrier, immediate relief. They feel great about it instantaneously, and that tends to last. And then finally, I think it's important to point out that regardless of their carrier status, so whether it came back as positive or negative test results, that parents said that they had a feeling of having increased control over the situation. So it's almost like you've now been given a game plan that you can tackle this problem. And also, I just want to highlight that no matter what the test results said, really all the parents that we talked to said that they were happy that their kids were tested, and they didn't have any regrets about it. So that gives you a sense of sort of what some of the big issues are for parents with Lynch syndrome, the ways that they're coping. And I just want to move on from research now and shift the focus to talk a little bit about ways that you can talk to kids about Lynch syndrome, children, grandchildren, whoever that might be for you in your life. So one of the first questions that parents have after they learn that Lynch syndrome runs in their family is, should I talk to kids about it? And it's understandable that parents' first instinct is often to not. They want to protect the kids from this information and not discuss the diagnosis about it. Mostly they're concerned about unnecessary worry for kids and how they would cope with that. But what's interesting is that a fair bit of research actually shows that children tend to cope better when the family is willing to talk about some of these issues. Because children are quite perceptive and they'll sense that something is wrong. So if you're feeling any anxiety yourself, it's likely that they can pick up on that. And usually not knowing why is a lot scarier than actually being informed about it. So obviously the decision to talk about your children, to talk about Lynch syndrome to your children, or when to talk about it, is very personal, and it comes down to parental judgment. But it's important to note that children about the age of 10 have been shown to really be able to grasp some of these concepts about what the genetic mutations are, and they're able to cope with it quite well. So it might be a helpful guideline to use. Also, I guess one other point to just highlight here is that it's quite important that this information comes from parents. And so, especially when we're talking about things like Lynch syndrome, if you feel like there's a chance that maybe a cousin, an aunt, or an uncle might say something to a kid, it's quite important that you yourself as a parent take control of it and allow the information to be transmitted kind of under your power. So I'm just going to finish up with some tips about talking to kids about Lynch syndrome. And the first is really to use age-appropriate language. So you need to speak to them at a level that they can understand and with an appropriate amount of information given their level. But regardless of their age or their level, it's important to give the name Lynch syndrome. Kids need to have a label for this. They need to have something that they can grab onto and that they can refer to if they want to come back to you and talk more about it. So you give the name Lynch syndrome and provide the basics about what it is. And then it's really important to reassure them that having Lynch syndrome doesn't equate to having cancer necessarily. So when kids are given this story, their main concern is that their parent is dying. They have cancer and that they're dying right now. And so it's very important to kind of reassure them around this issue. It's also really important to place a positive emphasis on the importance of knowing about Lynch syndrome. So how is this a good thing? Well, for example, you could stress about improved screening and how that allows for earlier detection and how better treatment options come out of that. So really place the emphasis on the positive. And you want to make sure that you prompt children to ask questions. So in general, kids are afraid of upsetting their parents around sensitive issues, and so they'll tend to not be direct about it. So it's really the parent's job to take charge and ask kids to voice their concerns or their questions so that they can be addressed. And then finally, it's important to remember that talking about Lynch syndrome is not a one-off discussion. This is something that kids need to go away with and process and come back to. So it's a good idea to remember to just kind of keep bringing it up and allowing platforms for them to talk to you about it. So that would be the end, but I'd be remiss if I didn't thank everybody here who was so kind as to either talk to me on the phone or to complete the questionnaire, because without you, this would have been possible. Thank you.